Welcome to the Course of Action podcast. My guest today is George Randall, managing partner of the Talent War Group and co-author of The Talent War. George is a U.S. Army veteran, executive consultant, leader, podcast host, and much more. It's my pleasure to have him on today. Get ready for George Randall. All right, George, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I hope all is well with you.
It is. I was kind of hey, thanks, man, for having me on. I appreciate it. I was kind of hoping to slow down as I head into the holidays and just handle the holiday stuff, but I got 3 sets of tickets booked between now and December, and none of it is personal.
So business is good.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there, and as we kind of come out of COVID, things are starting to pick up, and it looks like whatever personal matters, I got to get them handled before the holidays, because January 2nd or 3rd, we are going to go Mach 2 with our asses on fire for sure.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off with, let's talk about who George was prior to the Talent War Group. U.S. Army officer, how did all that come about?
Well, let's see. So, oldest of 4 boys, dad driving a truck, mom a social worker, so kind of figured if I was going to do college, I had to pay for it. So
Right.
I ended up enlisting in the Army and the reserves. And somewhere along the way, I had a very colorful vernacular, is the best way to say it. And somebody looked at me and said, well, if you think you're so smart, why don't you go be one of them there officers? So shrugged my shoulders, said, how hard could it be? And, got my commission through ROTC. Turned out to be a whole lot harder than I thought. But yeah, active for, I think, about just right under 8 years. And of the 8 years, other than 8-9 months in schoolhouse or about a year in schoolhouse, all of them were in leadership roles. And so I kind of won the lottery as an officer in the Army to go from leadership role to leadership role. It was, I was very fortunate. And to be honest with you, I actually, I'm very grateful, because as I often joke, I had a drunk assignments officer, because I went to a small school in Missouri and a political science degree or whatever. And what I ended up doing, he just put my name on a dart, threw it over his shoulder, and I ended up in Berlin in 1989, which was,
Wow.
yeah, really cool. And as soon as I got those orders, I was like, ooh, I really should have paid attention in history class, because I know there's a lot going on there, and I probably ought to come up to speed quickly. But great assignment.
Yeah.
Great assignment.
Yeah, you spent some time in some unique places. I was fortunate too to have a lot of really good assignments and a lot of good leadership positions in my 12 years in the Air Force. But you just weren't in Berlin. You were with U.S. CENTCOM. You went to Cuba.
Yeah, I actually went to Kenya and Somalia out of Berlin, which was quite the surprise. My daughter's 4 days old, and I get pulled into a skiff, and they said, hey, what do you know about Africa? I'm like, I guess you guys are going to tell me more than I want to know. So did that, came back, did the advanced course, pretty quickly into command. But then, I joke with the folks at the Talent War Group, is because they're all what we call GWAT babies, Global War on Terror, and I'm the only Cold War one. So I went to, Gitmo for the Haitian vacation of 94, and built all of the very first camps at Guantanamo Bay. So,
wow.
Yeah, that was, that's not something that you plan for, that all of a sudden you've got about 5,000 migrants. And then we had Cubans coming, so I had to take over. Castro was letting the criminals go, so I had to take care of those. And then I drew the short straw, so I had all the Hep A, Hep B, Hep C, HIV positive, TB positive. I had that camp. So it was, at one hand, I'm trying to make sure that people are taken care of and, people are safe. And then I'm trying to figure out the shelf life of baby food, because I've gotten kids born in my camps. Then I'm trying to figure out, how do you clean 350 porta-johns? These are not exactly topics that they taught you at either the basic or the advanced course, but you're doing an important mission, and it truly defined the term Groundhog Day. Truly defined it.
Every single day was the same thing, same challenges.
Yeah, one day I finally needed a break, and I was just 20-hour days, and we're doing so much, and refugees are coming in. I mean, literally 2,500 at a pop as a Coast Guard cutter pulls up. And I showed up down to the tent, and I'm sitting on these things, and I think I'm going to do some kind of church service. And it happened to be a Catholic priest. He comes over. He's like, "George, can I help you with anything?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a busy guy, Padre. Get the show on the road." And he looks at me and says, "George, it's Wednesday." I was like, "Oh, I think I'm a bit off on the service schedule here." So
sometimes it does that though. I had plenty of military days where, I looked at it and I said, oh, God, it feels like Friday, but I know it's Tuesday. Like it was just the week sometimes.
It was crazy. And, we talked about it in our book. And, it really just was the U.S. military is the greatest leadership incubator. And I know we have inter-service rivalries and all the colorful jokes that go along with them. But it doesn't matter what unit you served in. It doesn't matter what branch or specialty, function, skill. It's still the greatest leadership incubator. And I got to tell you, from my deployments, there are many times where I would look over at the Air Force people and go, yeah, I went into the wrong recruiting station, clearly. But, I got to work with Air Force folks. I got to work with Marines. I got to work with the Navy. Hats off to, all my sisters and brothers in arms for all the stuff that they do, because everybody has their version of misery and success.
Yep.
And any service that you join, you're serving and you're working your ass off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's different conditions, in everything. And I know there's plenty of jobs. I worked with the Army for almost half of my career in joint assignments. And, I have a huge respect for them and the way, they were kind of treated and the way their NCOs were utilized and just the way they utilized the different leadership tiers a little differently than the Air Force did. What a first sergeant was for from both services was similar but different. Same thing with sergeant major and a chief. Similar but different, and just to see kind of how they used them. I gained a new respect. I know a lot of my peers in the Army did too, but I agree with what you said. It's the best leadership incubator, because even if you don't work any kind of joint assignments and you just stay within your service, you're still learning so much, and there's so many challenges. It can be a Groundhog Day every day, or it can be a brand new challenge, every single day. And you're absolutely right.
It was great. The only steep moment of my learning curve was when I did go work joint, and my boss was a Marine lieutenant colonel. And I was actually used to an environment where I could openly provide an alternative opinion or alternative course of action. And I wasn't aware that Marine colonels weren't necessarily open to that. So there are those adjustments from time to time, but fine officers, great leaders, and you just kind of have to learn on the fly and adjust, and it's just a great time.
Oh, absolutely. So how did the Talent War Group come about? How did you get involved? How did it start? Tell us kind of the backstory on that.
Well, it's really a weird story with a lot of serendipitous moments. The first one was I picked up the book Extreme Ownership by Leif Babin and Jocko Willink and started reading it. And the very first muster that Jocko held was in Austin, Texas, where I live, but I happened to be working for a hedge fund in New York City. And Leif Babin's family or relatives VRBO'd my house. And they opened up a door too fast. It dented a wall a little bit. And my wife was quick on her feet. And she said, hey, I think my husband really, really likes that stuff. So I got a signed book from Leif and his family, which was really cool. So I started listening to Jocko podcast, and I heard Mike Sorelli, I think it's Jocko podcast 134. And it really touched me. And he said he was in Austin and starting this placement firm. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I think there's a lot of synergies. I was the VP of talent acquisition for a cybersecurity firm, and I built veterans firms. And I said, hey, maybe we should talk. Mike responded immediately. We had breakfast, and we kind of hit it off, and we're like, hey, this would be really good. So he invited me to be an advisor to his company. And so we did that for quite a while, but somewhere along the line, Mike was forced to watch Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and certainly wasn't paying attention with his wonderful wife Jordan. And he called me up and he said, we really do have to write this book. And we had kind of batted around the idea, but he called me up. I said, yeah, you know what, brother, let's go do it. And so we brought the special operations Mike's side and my 20 plus years in talent acquisition, and we kind of put them together to write The Talent War, how special operations and great organizations win on talent. A lot of great contributors that really brought the book to life. Of course, after you get done writing and editing, you end up hating the thing because you're tired of it. And so what ended up happening is, because of the success of the book, we decided to take the company EF Overwatch, which was the placement arm, and made an arrangement with Jocko and Leif, and then brought it under ownership of Mike, myself, and Carly Walden. And so it was EF Overwatch and really just placement of special operations veterans. And then because of the book, it became advisory services, executive coaching, leadership development, and placement. And so we've really been enjoying some success, steep learning curve, but really getting after it.
So the book came before the company then?
Yeah, Mike was as I understand, was truly one of the top facilitators and instructors for Jocko's company, Echelon Front, and doing the musters. And, I think I've been to 4 or 5 of them, and all, that team, just huge respect for what Jocko's put together and Leif has put together. Fantastic team. As I advised them, and then we started doing a little bit more placement, and then the book was successful, I came over full time, and we just said, hey, I don't think that this is kind of your core offering. What if Mike and I just take it? And so that's really what we've done. So, we maintain those ties with Jocko, Leif, and, JP and Dave and all of those fine instructors. But yeah, it's our own gig.
Well, and Jocko's just massive. He's huge.
Yeah, and
everybody,
you know what?
Everybody knows him.
Shout out to Jocko, and a major thanks, because as we were going through this, Jocko invited Mike and I to preview our book on the Jocko podcast number 244, which, it's an honor and it's a gift, and very, very grateful to get that kind of backing and tailwind behind us as we push this book out.
So you guys have helped through the Talent War Group thousands of professionals, over 2,000 executives, a lot of people in the Fortune 100 companies across the world. Building teams is really important to you guys. The book is almost as I was reading through it, I was like, this is also almost like a very tactical human resources approach to things. And talent is a really big deal. And I think I work for the government now currently as a government civilian leader, and HR is always one of my issues. And it's because they think of it just as human resources. It's not talent. It's not recruiting. It's not retention. It's just, oh, you have a vacancy, let's fill it. Oh, you have a problem, let's counsel it, And I wish I could give this book to every single person I meet in that realm and say, you read this and tell me this, tell me you can think the same way after you've read every single page, because you can't.
Thank you for those props. I just want to clarify one thing. So, we have helped and coached and counseled over 1,000 vets. What we did is took, for marketing purposes, all of our placements that Carly, Mike, and I have done, and because I had worked at scale and my teams have hired over 80,000. So that's the experience we all brought into the Talent War, although it's a relatively new business, but we've placed hundreds. And we've coached and developed thousands of veterans, Carly, Mike, and myself, prepping them for their transition. And, we do a lot of pro bono work. But yeah, the book, thank you for the compliment. Having spent so much time on the business side, HR is either thought of, to your point, of compliance. It's thought of the blocking and tackling, the payroll, the performance management, the online training, the, making sure that everybody's certified in the latest different sexual harassment training or, compliance issues. And it's not thought of as part of an ecosystem of the business. And it doesn't matter your product or your service or what you're doing. It is about the talent. So it's really drove me nuts. And matter of fact, I had done offers and put a lot of CHROs in their seat. They're paid 1/3 of their C-suite counterparts. So what we wanted to do in the book was really say, folks, because it's always about the talent, you can't have the human resources function and talent acquisition and all the and leadership development that goes with it as a backbench or a bolt-on or something where you throw stuff over the fence and they catch it. It is a strategic and a tactical function that's a differentiator.
Yeah, they got to be sitting at the table. They have to be treated like every other manager, every other executive. Like, it's funny that when I booked you on to come on here and I started looking into what Talent War Group did, I signed up for my next class in my doctorate program, which was human resources. And I thought, oh well, this is perfect. And the whole class so far has been about looking at strategies and tactics and not doing the same things. Like, problem with human resources is they're worried about fixing the nuts and bolts and tightening them down so that it doesn't break. That's it.
Yeah. And in defense of some of it, if you don't get your people paid on time, if you don't have their health care benefits, if you don't have the basic blocking and tackling done, you're going to have a big problem.
Absolutely.
But I think, I wrote a blog about this, and what I'm telling people, there's two things that I would give to your listeners. And Tracy Keogh, who we interviewed for the book, she was the CHRO of HP. She had the basic quote when somebody looked at her and they said, we're glad HR is at the table. And she said, oh, no, we are the table. And that was really the tone of the book that we tried to set. But if you remember back at the financial and the housing collapse, all that big crisis of 2008, it was kind of the era of the CFO. And all of a sudden, the CFO got magnified. And now those people who had not magnified and seen as a strategic asset their human resources function were scrambling with the onset of the pandemic and the COVID virus. Now it's like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And you're looking at your HR folks. And if you don't have strategic business leaders in those positions, companies are struggling in a big way.
Yeah, it's too bad that we had to have a pandemic for some of this stuff to kind of be realized, because, at the very beginning of it, you saw some companies who were like, okay, we got this. We're going to buy laptops, additional monitors. You guys go home and work. And then there's other companies who are like, we don't even have the money to do that if we wanted to. Some companies couldn't do it, and it was just like, it just made me realize in the military, we prepare for almost everything. There's plans for plans for plans for plans. And I looked around at a lot of different businesses and I was like, you guys didn't even have a plan A, let alone a plan B in case something like this happened. Now, was it predictable? No, not really. But no business owner thinks I got to have a plan in case a huge pandemic breaks out worldwide and I can no longer sell beer out of my brewery anymore. I don't necessarily think anybody saw that coming, but at the same time, the ones who sank were the ones who didn't have. The ones who swam and kind of kept their head above water, they did something. They flipped the plan B. They kind of adjusted to the constraints that we had, knowing, it could be a month, it could be 2 years. They didn't know. But there's a lot of issues. And what have you seen working with people, kind of pre-pandemic into the pandemic, and now as we're kind of doing post-pandemic?
Well, as we went into the pandemic and into the unknown, the people in the human resources function in the talent acquisition space, they were the best. Were saying, okay, no matter how catastrophic this turns out, it's another environmental condition that we have to react to. And so they put their best thinking forward, and they started with, what results are we trying to achieve? And then how do we accomplish those from a talent perspective? Maybe that's partial at work. Maybe that's flex. It's analyzing your workforce. Where are we weak? Where are we strong? who can work remote, who can't, what should we make sure is remote, and we start saving some money as we, look at the revenue impact of this. Those were the great people. And as you got into it, really what I think threw people and what people are struggling with is as they struggled through the now mostly remote environment for a lot of places, people thought, okay, at some point we're going to get back to normal. And they missed the point that what you were creating was a new normal. You were talking, the companies that were struggling were either completely unprepared, to your point, and didn't have thinkers, didn't have leadership, which was the big failing. And now people that are in the new normal, everybody had to unwind their holidays, their travel, their buying habits, their fitness habits, their financial habits, their work habits. Everything had, childcare, schools. They had to completely adjust their whole life. And the employers that were doing it kind of the wrong way are thinking, well, we're going to unwind all that and bring everybody back at some point. So they started planning for that versus planning for the environment that they were in and how to optimize that environment. And the companies that are winning in this space, the clients that I talk to, are the ones that look at this and say, you know what? We have the Great Resignation. We have mixed rules across states and across countries, returning to work, vaccinations, all that. We're going to double down on leadership because the leadership is what's going to matter. That's going to think through, meaning there's too many things in this pandemic to consider, even for an HR leader. So good leadership all the way down and leadership at every level is what's going to get you through.
So I won't name the command that I work for, the specific unit, but I can tell you that at the beginning of the pandemic, they were like, remote working isn't going to work. We've got to find a way around this. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to find a way around it. Remote working, teleworking was going to be temporary in their opinion. And, people got sent home. We were doing a blue and white shift, half people in the building, while the other half were at home, blah, blah, blah. And the deeper we got into it and the more restrictions the state and federal started putting, the more they realized everybody just has to go home. We're talking bare bones, minimum amount of people so the mission doesn't break type of thing in the building. Everybody else go home, stay home, and do your thing. 2 months later, 3 months later, they start realizing productivity didn't drop off.
Right.
If anything, it increased. It got better because people are chilling at home. They're comfortable. They're relaxed. I can do my laundry in between a meeting. I can do all kinds of things. At 5 o'clock, I can literally shut it down for the day. I've gotten everything accomplished.
Or you had those people that would be on a commute from 5 till 6:30 during rush hour. And now they're like, yeah, you know what? I'll put in an extra 30, 45 minutes because I'm still gaining time. You gain time in the morning because you didn't have to commute. I saw, and I've seen a lot of companies do it right, but I do want to call out, and, I won't name the employer, the CHRO would have been my boss. And as it hit, I was advising, EF Overwatch, which became Talent War Group, but was in the cybersecurity company. And we collectively saw it coming, meaning we didn't know the nature, the length, or the depth of the change. But we started thinking very quickly on our feet to say, okay, we still need to deliver these results to our customers, be that sales, be that customer support. We still need to drive research and development, product development. We still need to do all of that. We still need to do everything. So let's label and let's name and identify all the key targets, goals, and then all of the things underneath them that we have to get accomplished. Then we said, okay, now let's look at the workforce. Where do they need to be to do that? Meaning we didn't think, which a lot of companies made the mistake that says, oh, I have to have people here. We worked from what we were delivering, what we were selling, what we had to do and achieve, and then work back based on how our workforce was. And so we were effectively creating a new scenario for our workforce globally, that it didn't matter what would come and how long the pandemic lasted.
Right.
And I think that's the way that you do it, is you work from the results and you go back. It's kind of like, what you were just talking about, plan A, plan B, plan C, all the plans we made, they were all premised off of what does success look like and how do we get there?
Yeah, because, and to your point, they did work backwards, because I even saw breweries who, a brewery should be shut down during the pandemic. What can they do? Mm-hmm. You can't sell beer in your brewery. People can't attend anymore. Yep. And they just figured it out. They started doing deals with food trucks, and you could come get food to go. Mm-hmm. If the liquor laws in their state allowed you to do alcohol to go, they were packaging up, you can come get a beer and come get food to go from this, sausage truck. And they were making business still happen. They were keeping employees in house, and they were finding work for them to do. And they kind of went backwards and created a new success. Grocery stores did it too. My hometown never used to have to go groceries. You had to go in the store, you had to shop, and you had to walk out and load your car up. Now you can pull up to 8 different spots, press an app on your phone, say, hey, I'm here, and somebody brings it out and loads it into your car. That's a small town grocery store.
It's crazy. And 2 things. Well, first of all, God bless Texas, because there were so many to-go or delivery margarita outlets. I was going to survive the pandemic. It's so funny, the things I started arguing with my wife over, which was who was closer to the remote. So what a change. But what really drove that kind of thinking at the brewery you're talking about, that's talent. That's why there was nobody in that brewery with previous experience of something like this. And in companies, nobody had experienced the pandemic before. The people that got through it, it's the talent, which is why, Mike and I said in our book that experience tells you where you've been, and it may well prepare you for some things that are coming up. But it's the talent, it's the character attributes, it's the creative, the curiosity of how can we do something different. It's the effective intelligence of how do you solve a problem where there's no previous book solution or example to guide you forward. So it's the talent that really got that brewery through. And then you've got consumers that are going, hey, man, I can now get this beer, or now that may never have seen that brewery and now have it delivered. Yeah. And so now they even have more customer base. It's like that's talent, and that's talent in action.
Well, and talent, when you have talented people around you and you can recognize the talent, and as a leader, you don't hold that back. You absolutely let it go unchained. And then that's when they bring new ideas. The likelihood of one of the employees at that brewery coming up with the idea of food to go was probably fairly high. They probably mentioned it to their boss, like, hey, don't cancel food trucks. Have them keep coming. Let's order to go boxes and let's start packaging it up like that. We don't have to stop production. Might have to slow down because we won't have as much coming to the brewery, but we can still go. We can still earn a profit. We can still do a lot of things.
Exactly. And there's 2 things, and I'm doing a lot of executive coaching now. And so I give them the example of Mike and I writing the book. And Mike and I are 2 generally high ego people, and good ego in that we always want to do something better. And so we came across, or he reminded me, I don't know where it originated, but I want to give Mike credit. We operated under the best idea wins. And so even if Mike was talking about special operations, I'd say, you know what, Mike, that wording isn't resonating with me. Here's how I think we should write it. Mike would go, yep, that's it. Let's go with that. I would talk about something in talent acquisition, and Mike, it wouldn't resonate with Mike, who's got no experience in my world, nor me in his. And he'd say, it sounds just better. I'd be like, you know what, Mike, I like that. So the best idea wins is when you have great leaders like at that brewery and somebody steps up and says, hey, let's work with the food trucks. You've got to have that humility as a leader to go, that's a great idea. It gets us to mission success. We're going with that one. And your ego's out of it.
Let's not be scared of trying. Yeah, let's try it. Let's not be scared of trying, because at this point in time during a pandemic, nothing's working. Everything's a challenge. So why not try something that might break the mold? Why not try something that will set us apart? It could be a new business practice, and for a lot of them, it is.
Yeah.
They didn't stop doing to-go stuff. They kept doing it when things opened back up because it was just a new revenue stream. It was a new best practice, and it was a lot of great ideas and things are going to come out of this. And something I've seen the Air Force react to is saying, telework and remote work is no longer a dirty word.
Yep.
We're getting a whole lot done. Our overhead is down because we don't have to have these massive office buildings anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We can have 50% of the staff in the building. We can designate certain positions for essential duty. They have to be here. Others we can send home, and we get the same production, if not more, out of them.
Oh, yeah.
What's the problem? It's not broken.
And I have a podcast, a Talent War podcast, and I brought my evil twin on, and her name's Karen Clark, who's now the CHRO of the company that I was at. She said it perfectly. When she coaches anybody, especially the executives, she says, start with the results in mind and be flexible. What difference does it make as long as you're accomplishing your mission? Get the old ways of thinking out of your head and be flexible. And the example you gave is spot on. Hey, some people can go home. Some people can back and forth. Some people are full-time in the office. Whatever it takes to win and succeed, go do it. And don't let your ego and old thinking get in the way of dealing with circumstances that you could have never foreseen.
Right. So let's talk about the book development. How long did it take? What was it like? When did kind of that strategy kind of click and that light bulb turn on, go, we got this?
Well, I will say, of all the things that Mike and I did right, is we found this publishing company, Scribe Media, and then I think Lioncrest eventually publishes the book. But we interviewed 4 writers to help us. It's our words, and so we started with, they interviewed, once we picked a writer, she interviewed us as to what success would look like. Who's our audience? What points do we want to get across? What do we want ultimately for readers to take away? Because she needed to really get the motivation out of our head and also help us very much gain as much clarity as possible on staying focused. Because when it comes to talent, you could literally boil the ocean. And we were, from the get-go, we did not do that. So she took us through an outline, and then we spent about 2 or 3 weeks going through, refining the outline, understanding how we were going to separate the 3 major parts of the book, and then what chapters would go into where. And then it was a flip-flop. And I will say, just to answer your question directly, normally this takes people 2 years. I think Mike and I were publishing at 18 months, and it was because of the best idea wins. And so what we would do is, we would have a chapter title. Mike and I would be on a Zoom for 2.5 hours. She would be taking notes, transcribing. She would get a transcription of the video and the audio. And then she would go back, and the next week she would bring us kind of page 1 and page 2 to see if we got the tone and the ideas right, setting up each chapter. And if she was on target, great. If she wasn't, we would make some adjustments. And then she would start filling in from a lot of the audio and putting that all into a cohesive message. And so we would just leapfrog week after week after week after week. And where it got really hard is, I think we did 11 chapters, brought it down to 10 with kind of acknowledgments at the back. Then you get into editing, because there's a price point, there's a word count, and if you go over the word count. And so I think we went through about 3 months worth of editing, twice a week, chapter by chapter, doing the editing on the wording. And then the final month was making sure that we had the pieces in the right order and that the flow was there. And once we got to the final edits, you're just reading to it over and over and over to make sure that it flows correctly. By the way, at the same time we did that, we sent kind of the first draft of the manuscript to the DoD, because we had to clear it through the DoD process. So during COVID, that was a little bit of a time hang up, but they were really great in working with us. And then what Mike and I did is we went to a couple of people that we trusted and gave them kind of a final edit version and had them go through so we could get out of our own way and hear what other people had to say. And then we came back, did another round of edits, and then you do what's called lock the book, which is Then it gets to typesetting, so they can put it in so it reads and flows correctly in the format of the size of the book that you've chosen. And then, one thing I did leave out is along the way, Mike and I were doing interviews of special operations senior leaders, CHROs, CEOs, and then we take their quotations and put those in different parts in the book. So we probably did about 25 senior leaders, would cut those out. And so at the end of the day, once we locked that manuscript, we were done. And when they would bring us back kind of the final copy, and then of course along the way, you have to figure logos, you have to figure the font, you have to figure out the graphics, the photos, all of those things. And it turns out, here's a little thing, we put the Marine Raider Green Beret patch and the Navy Trident, the SEAL Trident, on the cover of the book, and DOD said, absolutely not. You can't do that. You can talk about that in the book. Okay. So we had to redo all of our cover art, all of our colors, which, we...
Really?
Yeah, we were a little surprised by that. But the point...
lots of people have done that.
Yeah. And they weren't supposed to. I think if you wrote it as an author, let's say you were a Navy SEAL and you had earned the Trident, then if it was your story, you had the right to put your own art on there. But because we were writing a book that took as special operations as kind of our laboratory, our example, our case study, to use those badges was, according to DOD, not appropriate. So what we did is we quickly shifted to Special Operations Command patch and then modified that to where it was the cover art of our book.
Yeah, it looks great. It's simple. It's very bold. It's right there, kind of in your face. And it's plain and simple. I really like it. And I'm kind of at that phase now in my book where I'm doing the edits. We're going through with the editor and we're beating everything up. And I was like, when I handed it over to the publisher, I was like, man, you know what? It's never going to be perfect in my eyes, but I thought it was pretty good. And pretty good, I was okay with pretty good in my eyes because I know how hard I am on myself. And as I'm getting the edits back, and I'm like, I can't believe they even signed me.
Yeah, they did this kind of the same thing with us, but since we had a writer, the grammar and stuff, we didn't have so much of a challenge with. Really the odd part was we had to do so much education with the person writing, and her name's Kelsey Adams. To deal with two knuckleheads like Mike and I, she's a saint. And we had to educate her because all of a sudden we would start talking in acronyms. And she'd be like, stop.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean? How do we get that across to the reader? But, do you know what the hardest part for us was after we locked the book was actually Mike and I decided to do the audiobook. And a funny story is we get into the studio and we're doing it. We divided up the chapters, and Mike's schedule allowed him to go in for the first day and a half, first 2 days, and then I followed on the next 2 days. Mike calls me up at the end of day one, and he goes, I just want to warn you, this killed me. He goes, this was the most brutal thing I've ever done. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, on one hand, here's a 10 combat tour special operations guy telling me it's hard, which should warn me. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, all you had to do was talk into a microphone, Mike. Well, what's wrong with you, dude?
Yep.
I should have paid attention. Well, it wouldn't have made any difference. But halfway through the first day, I'm doing yoga poses. I'm stretching. I'm bending over. I'm taking Tramadol. I'm taking Motrin. I am aching from toe to head trying to do the audiobook. It was the most difficult part of the book, to be honest.
I've heard just going through it and reading it line by line, and you mess up a word and it's like, go back and do the whole paragraph over because you got to capture the whole tone. And I was like, oh man, if we ever do an audiobook, I'm not doing it myself. Somebody else is going to read it. I'm going to find somebody because I'm not attempting to do that myself.
Yeah, it was brutal because, to your point, if you fumble a word and it's your own writing, then you got to redo the paragraph and you got to do it according to tone and cadence. But then day 2 is cleanup from when you went from one paragraph to another. And did you get the same tone and cadence? So, you'd be sitting with these headphones on like we are now, and he'd go, okay, playback, match this. He would give me like 4 or 5 words. I'd hear the tone, the cadence, my own voice, and then I'd have to pick up from there. You go, okay, let's try it again. I was like,
Wow.
man, oh man. And, we had a great technician, and I think we turned out a really great product, but the writing was the easy part.
Yeah, compared to doing the audiobook.
Absolutely.
So, if I'm an HR director, a talent acquisition specialist, a recruiter, and you hand me the Talent War, how do I unbox it all? Because you guys drop some gems in there. You have some excellent people that you quote and that you interviewed, and just the content. Every page is just more, more. How does somebody unbox that and kind of get started without having kind of that shock of whoa?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is for HR leaders, we are handing you additional ammunition to make the argument that A, you are the table. Number 2, you are the gateway to every revenue, service, and R&D producing team in your firm. And we're going to give you the business reasons why you absolutely should be the guardian of the culture, the standards of the talent, and the gateway to everything great at that company. So that's first and foremost. This helps you get out of the tactical mode into the strategic and make the business argument for it. The second thing is it's going to challenge HR leaders, and what they need to unpack is really 2 or 3 critical points, which is you can't see talent. Don't think for a second that you can, so get that out of your head. Second, you have to have a process that reveals it. Number 3, don't over-rotate on experience, because it's the character attributes that are the most predictive of success in your very unique and specific environment. And then lastly, how do you build those processes that help you get through the talent in a way that puts pressure on them, that defines those attributes, and helps you understand bringing in people that will be additive to your organization. It does undo a few myths about experience and some other things. But more than anything else, if you're an HR leader and you're hearing this, we hope you like the book, because it is the template and additional ammunition for you to be playing the role that can change the trajectory of your company.
Well, like you said earlier, experience is great, but it's not everything, and it doesn't necessarily prepare you for everything. It can be very, very helpful, but it's not everything. And again, like you said, you can't see talent. So you mix those 2 together and you've got something special. You can utilize experience for certain things, but it's not everything. And you guys really do. This is the HR book, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. We were kind of hoping that was really what we wanted to do. And I'm sorry to interrupt, for those people that follow sports out there, you could see that there's countless examples. And we had somebody, Brian Decker, who redid Special Forces Assessment Selection, who's now with the Indianapolis Colts as a VP of Player Development. And, he was one of those people, he just made the argument, which we knew, but he put it into a sports reference, which is there's lots of number 1 draft choices that come into an organization. They fail miserably. Then they move on to their second team and they thrive. Or use the case of Tom Brady, regardless of what you think of Tom Brady. He was drafted like 190th, 192nd, but you put him in the right environment with that talent, and look what he's doing. So it's the experience. Does it show you some things? Absolutely. Should you disregard it? No, you should not. But it's not necessarily predictive. And so it's just huge.
Well, and your sports reference is probably spot on. It's probably the most accurate way of describing it, because, of course, there's been massive first round draft picks that everybody was hailing as the next greatest thing at every position, and they were duds. and it was the ones who were dedicated or the ones that, people saw something different in. Like Bill Belichick obviously saw something in Tom Brady at Michigan that he said, this guy's going to be the next one. He might have just said he's the next guy for the Patriots. He might not ever have known 6-7 Super Bowls later, but he knew there was something there, and he's in a way he saw through the experience and saw the talent. And I know you guys say you can't see talent, but I think the way of realizing that and understanding, Bill Belichick understood where the talent was and how to find it.
Yeah, and when we say you can't see talent, and that's where kind of the football reference, because you get game tape and you get to see a lot of things. The one thing that I wish we had added in a sports analogy would have been, and we had to cut probably about 2,000 words, to get within the limits. But people could think of, just say the NFL, and you get somebody who is the top free agent on the market. And I equate that to kind of, in the corporate world, when you see this executive or senior leader come available, it's kind of like nepotism. Bring him into your company thinking, they did success over here, they're going to bring success into our culture. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
The top draft choice, he may go for the most money, but he gets put into a spot where the system, the culture, doesn't take advantage of his talents, or his character or lack of character becomes toxic on the team. And that happens time and time and time again with especially executive referrals. People, you need to bring this person over here. They were killing it over at this company, and they'll kill it for us, and they'll bring their clients. Rarely works out that way. Rarely lives up to the hype. And you see a lot of free agents that are very much the same.
So I think you mentioned something about another book. Are we getting a second book from you guys?
We are, on leadership and culture, because, we close the book with, you can't hire or fire your way to success. You have to lead. And so a bunch of us have gotten together. We've added 3 other authors. So this is a little bit odd. And the company was a little bit skittish about doing it with us, but we have 5 authors, fortunately. But we have Rich Deviney, so Mike Sorelli and myself, and then you have Rich Deviney, who wrote the book, The Attributes, the 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance. Brian Decker, who was featured in our book, who's the head of player development for the Indianapolis Colts and former Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army Special Forces. And then Tom Lokar, who is a 3-time CHRO. And the book is really about more much like the Talent War, somewhat of a user's guide to talent. We were trying to do the same thing for leadership and culture, because people keep writing about both things, but many books out there, as great as they are, miss the point that culture is about behaviors, and behaviors stem and flow from leadership or lack thereof. And so we wanted to provide kind of a user's guide. And I think we've knocked out all the chapters, and we're about to start getting into the pages and the initial edits. But I have to tell you, these guys really tested my brain. And I think we all feel that way. It's like, if you ever have to put down into words, and remember, you're putting yourself out there in the public, how do you describe leadership in a way that it resonates with people and resonates in a new way that's easy to read, easy to absorb, and easy to put into action right away? And, we've brought, I think, arguably some of the best leaders to bear. I think each one of us looks at the group the same way I do, like, maybe I'm the weak link here. I don't know. But it's a great group of people, and I think this is going to be even better.
Is there a release date or a title yet?
The title, we came up with a bunch, and none of them resonated with us. And what we're hoping is, as we write, that there's going to be kind of a tagline that jumps out at us. We hope to do that in the next 60 days. Release date, the way we're on pace, I would say that this will probably make it to typesetting. My hope would be May. We would love to target Memorial Day weekend, but that's being like super optimistic for us, knowing what we have to go through.
Yeah, right.
But if anybody can do it, these guys can, because we're pretty
awesome.
quick to go. Yeah, that resonates. Let's go with that.
So before I let you go, what's next for the Talent War Group?
Well, for me, I will say this, and I think it's the same for Carly, and it really is the same for Mike too. The three of us that are owners, are managing partners and owners, and I think it is. I've jumped out of the corporate world after 20 plus years, and we'd like this to be our legacy and grow people under us that look at talent the same way we do and aren't going to companies just to make revenue, just to, in 5-10 years be sitting on the beach somewhere. We are passionate about talent, and we want the way we do it to carry on. And so we hope to keep building every success, and certainly never taking any little success that we've gotten for granted, that we drive hard for the next 5-10 years and then leave something good for a lot of people to carry on.
That's awesome. So last thing, where can they find you and the Talent War Group if they want to learn more, they want to check on the podcast, the blogs, etc.?
Well, the book is basically, the first place you're going to look is Amazon, but you can get the book anywhere. The Talent War: How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. Talentwargroup.com. You follow us on LinkedIn or reach out to us on email. For me, it's just George@talentwargroup.com. And the Talent War podcast, which I run, is wherever you can find podcasts, Spotify, Apple. And then my co-author has one, because he's working with Men's Journal, called Truth and Tribe, podcast that he started. It's got talent at its core, but it goes a little bit different direction. And I think they're both really, really strong podcasts that we just try to give people something. Listen, you can absorb it and use it right away. But find it wherever you can, but definitely follow us on LinkedIn. We are all over that.
Awesome. Well, George, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate your time. I know you got to run and get ready for Thanksgiving, but I appreciate it so much in your time. And I really loved the book. I didn't get to completely read through it before this, but I'm definitely going to jump back on it because I was learning so much just turning the pages that I was turning. So my hat's off to you guys and everybody at the Talent War Group, because it's a game-changing way of looking at human resources and talent and even leadership. I'm looking forward to the second book.
Well, thank you, Jeff. My brother, I appreciate it. Thank you for your service, for having me on, and look forward to connecting again as soon as we can.
Will do. Thank you very much.